Welcome to Mining the Backlist to engage readers of all ages, presented by Library Pass and Comics Plus. My name is Gila Charles Gonzalez. I'm the Chief Content Officer for Library Pass and the moderator for today's session. I'm excited to be joined by a few of our publisher partners to spotlight some of their great backlist titles for readers of all ages and interests. Erin Pascal is the Senior Editor and Children's Licensing Manager at Andrews McMeel Universal and has previously held editorial positions at Scholastic, Disney, and Simon & Schuster. Sean Tullian is the editorial director of Graphic Universe, a comic book imprint for kids and teens at Lerner Publishing Group. His past editorial roles include stints at Stone Arch Books, Amazon, Alexa, and Audible, and comics and visual storytelling have been the consistent through line of his 17-year career. Morgana Santilli is the sales and marketing coordinator at Yen Press. She is a former comic shop manager and buyer and has always particularly loved helping readers find their new favorite series. Today's webinar is presented by Library Pass. We curate high-interest, immersive digital content that helps libraries and schools expand their reach and engagement without breaking their materials budget. Our Comics Plus platform offers unlimited simultaneous access to thousands of digital comics, graphic novels, and manga in collections curated for elementary, middle school, and high school readers. We also offer a complete collection, including thousands of additional titles for older readers to public and academic libraries. To learn more and sign up for a free demo account, you can visit comicsplusapp.com. You can also find us on various not Twitter social networks. And now let's jump into today's session and meet our panelists. So from my left to right, let me organize this in the order we're going to do our presentations. So Erin, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background with comics, and your connection, if any, to libraries.
Hi, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Guy. That was a fantastic introduction. And thank you so much to the other panelists for joining and everybody listening. It's really great chatting. It's funny, you're asking what's my connection to comics, and the answer is I have just always been a comics reader. So I attended a lot of these webinars. Well, back in the day, they were in person. Attended a lot of different events, and to actually be speaking on these events is always really fascinating to me because I was you so many times who's watching this. I'm very, connected to libraries, very connected to the school market. We at Andrews McMeel really pride ourselves in reaching kids where they are, which is oftentimes a lot in the school, library, and educational places. So yeah, turning it over.
Awesome. Sean, tell us a little bit about you and your connections.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sean Tullian. I think the first comic I ever read could be considered Edward Gorey, which is probably kind of weird when I was a kid. I had some uncles with some interesting tastes, I guess. And so that was probably my first exposure. But since then, I've always read anything in terms of visuals. I need visuals. I'm a visual learner. And I suppose that also is probably why I'm interested in libraries as well, because when I was younger in elementary school, there were two school librarians that really helped me kind of become passionate about reading. I was not initially an avid reader, but I quickly became one once I was exposed to comics. K.T. Camillo, for example, is somebody that came into life later, really appreciating. It's just kind of been a through line for my life. So I guess it's kind of become my career as a result.
Cool. All right. And Morgana.
Hi, I'm Morgana, Sales and Marketing Coordinator at Yen Press. Love the Edward Gorey call out. I'm a big fan of Gorey as well. My Dracula postcard there. And I'm outside of Boston, so I'm not too far from his house. It's a cool place. But yeah, I've also been reading comics my whole life. My dad collected Marvel comics when I was a kid, and exposed me to Sailor Moon early on. So I've been reading manga for about 25 years, and I'm 33 years old. So yeah, I've been into manga for a long time. Back in 2015, I interviewed at a comic book store that had a huge manga selection and kind of became their manga person, became their manager, and the rest is kind of history. Here I am pushing manga, on the publisher side of things now. And I'm a huge advocate for libraries. I love libraries. I have two small kids. We go to the library every weekend or every other weekend. I was always going to the library as a kid. So it's important to me to see our books making their way into the hands of readers, especially young readers. So
awesome. So we've gathered these three publishers, Andrews McMeel, Lerner, and Yen, for a couple of reasons. Andrews McMeel and Yen represent two of our most popular publishers on the overall platform. And Lerner is one of our most popular K-12 specific of our publishers who specifically target the school and library market as opposed to general consumer. And one of the things we noticed when we were doing our circulation analysis last year was the not unique to us, but overwhelming popularity of so-called backlist, books older than a year. When we did it, we went 2 years back to take that measurement, and I think it was 72% of the titles that had been checked out at least once on Comics Plus were published in 2022 or older. And I've always personally been fascinated by backlist because over the years, I've either been a super avid reader or a formerly avid reader who doesn't have the time to read as much as I'd like. So I've always been a believer that the backlist is the front list for the vast majority of readers. And so if you only talk about front list and obsess about the new and notable that everybody's talking about, particularly in libraries, you miss great opportunities to introduce readers to a wide variety of books they might be interested in. And so what we're going to talk through with each of our guests today is some examples from their catalogs of books that have performed particularly well on Comics Plus, and potentially get some context, if as you go through, if there are some that don't reflect typical consumer patterns, that'd be interesting to know. But for anybody who's unfamiliar with Comics Plus, digital comics platform, 60% of our customer base is in schools. So we kind of have the old Netflix challenge of before they introduced profiles, our most popular titles are heavily weighted on the kids side because that's who's got the most access to it. But we're also in a lot of public libraries. We see a lot of older content circulating as well. But what we're going to focus on today is backlist from each of our partners.
Happy to share the slides for Andrews McMeel Publishing. That's my name, spelled with 2 N's. I don't know why, we can ask my parents. So a little bit about us, for those who aren't familiar. Andrews McMeel Publishing is a small independent book publisher based in Kansas City, Missouri. We are distributed by Simon & Schuster and have global sales reach. And you might recognize some of our children's books because Andrews McMeel kids have all the fun. So at Andrews McMeel, we like to joke and say that our readers have all the fun because we focus on the joyful, fun books that readers want to read, and not that they have to. So some people say our books are for the reluctant reader, but I'm a little prickly to that because I don't think readers are reluctant. I think they're just distracted. So kids and reluctant readers, we'll call them, actually do read all the time. They read the captions on TikTok videos. They read the flavor text on their Pokemon cards. I know I do. And every 9-year-old at my trade nights also do the same thing. So I know they read a lot, and I know they read comics. And Andrews McMeel reaches kids and readers where they're at. So first, I'd love to chat about a comic book that's really near and dear to my heart, and it's called Milk and Mocha Comics Collection. So when I talk about reading everywhere, readers really are reading everywhere. And for those who are unfamiliar, Milk and Mocha are 2 bears you probably recognize, created by an artist named Melanie C. So Melanie started this project by creating some emojis and stickers, and she actually started posting them on apps like Instagram and other apps that kind of use emoticons. And then she branched into very short, very sweet online comics, and now, of course, has an online comic collection. So just to show you a little bit of the interior of Milk and Mocha and kind of how sweet and how we really see these comics. There is minimal text, but there is a lot that you can gather that's the basics and heart of what makes a good comic great. On the side panels, you can see Milk, who's the white bear, running up to Mocha, who's the brown bear. You really see a lot of their emotions. You can see kind of the hearts. And then, of course, you read the text, even if it's just squish, squish, squish. It kind of fills your heart with that joy, that really satisfying feeling you get from reading. But it's not just the literacy of the text. It's also the literacy of the movement. It's the literacy of the emotion, the socio-emotional lessons. There's just a whole lot there. I could honestly talk forever and ever about it. But instead, I will let you now read one. And now you will understand that I am actually one of these bears because I too cannot stop myself when I'm eating strawberry cheesecake. And so that's part of the relatable content here as well. So for a bit of a pivot, I'll go for emotions explained with buff dudes. So I think this is a really interesting one to talk about when we're talking about Backlist, because Emotions Explained with Buff Dudes actually published in 2018, and it was initially pitched as your fully illustrated guide to the hyper-conflicted, tragic comic feelings of your age. Basically, Disney's Inside Out, but explained with buff dudes instead of little guys that roam around your brain. And you can see some of the buff dudes on the cover here. So what we found actually is in 2018, we couldn't have guessed this, but in 2024, there's a little bit more of a gap between, a little less of a gap, I should say, between older readers and younger readers, because everybody's really finding themselves on TikTok, and different online platforms. So we'll see kids go into Sephora and buy skincare that's probably not age appropriate, but that's because they're seeing themselves in older people and older people they're connected with online. So there's a little bit less of a gap there. And what we've noticed is we found a lot of kids actually picking up Emotions Explained with Buff Dudes because the name is hilarious and you read that and it's so funny. So it's technically ages 16 plus, but we have really found kind of a new niche market in the last couple of years with some younger and kids readers, which is probably why it's done so well with Library Pass. So I'll share just some of the interiors here. And I definitely feel like these buff dudes who want their coffee first. And we have a quote from the creator below, so I'll read it out loud. You know how since the dawn of humanity, great philosophers and poets have dedicated their entire lives to exploring concepts like love, life itself, logic, and sorrow? Well, these great philosophers and poets are dead now, so I win. It's very good humor. And here's another one. Hey, brain, can you save this fun fact I found on the internet? Okay. Man, I wish I could do sound effects. So some of the fun literacy of comics that we're getting here. And if you totally throw that out, your brain, I completely understand because the buff dudes have explained it to me. So I'll go through some of Big Nate right now. Big Nate is one of our most popular books. We have a ton of books with Big Nate by Lincoln Pierce, who is super amazing. There's also a TV show that's now on Nickelodeon and Paramount Plus. Big Nate is actually a really interesting story because Andrews McMeel has a syndicate, and we started publishing Lincoln's comics on the syndicate. So when we wanted to publish graphic novels and comics and books in print form for Lincoln, we actually thought it was going to be an adult book first and then moved it over to kids because Big Nate is a kid. But what we found here is that both kids and adults really read these books and really resonate with them because they're not particularly written for an audience. They're just relatable, like I said. So I'll go through some of our backlist. Again, there are a lot of Big Nate books. Pausing a second. And hopefully you can see what I mean here. So I'll go through some more. This is Big Nate, Move It or Lose It. This one is coming out soon, so not yet on sale. We also have Nailed It, came out in 2023. Again, because Big Nate is such a big franchise, we do see every time a book is published upcoming, we do also see a lift in the backlist because it means that more readers are becoming aware of the brand. Or they're like, oh, I see that on the back cover. I didn't read that one yet. I'm going to go back and read it. More comics. Honestly, those dogs are just so cute. I'm such a dog person. And more comics. There are a lot of Big Nate books. And they're also low-flying corn muffins, which you can find out in Big Nate, Beware of Low-Flying Corn Muffins. Okay, so not Big Nate. This one is Pocket Peaches, and I'm very excited to talk about Pocket Peaches. This is actually technically backlist because it's 2023, but came out in late September, so it was a fall 2023 book, only a couple of months old at this point. Pocket Peaches is a debut book series by an author named Dora Wang, and this one's also a little bit similar to Milk and Mocha in the sense that Dora created some illustrations of bunnies that she posted online and didn't initially think about publishing graphic novels. She actually started selling a lot of stationery and stickers on Etsy. And that's when we found her at Andrews McMeel. I had actually bought some stickers for her because it's so stinking cute. And I asked her if she had any narrative ideas. We kind of chatted a lot together and realized that her narrative ideas for her brand really matched what makes a good comic and a good story versus a comic collection. So this book is actually part of a new line we're doing at Andrews McMeel specifically for early readers. They're 80 pages long. The content is really easy to sound out. So we've also found that English as second language learners are also really getting a lot of value because you can pronounce every word that you see. I often say the word special is one I always take out because if you see the letters special on a page, how do you pronounce that if you don't know how to speak English or you're learning English? You cannot. It's very difficult. So I take out the word special all the time. I take out the word beautiful because of the same thing. It's always pretty. Delicious becomes tasty. And these comics really appeal to easy reading, but sneaky easy reading. It's not a leveled reader. You're going to read it and you're not going to feel like, oh, I just learned how to read, but it is going to increase your reading level. Or just be fun, because that's also the point. So here, you can see some of what I mean with a little bit of the minimal text, as well as just kind of how it balances on the page. Something else we've done with Pocket Peaches, which I think is really cool, is this is actually in a dyslexia-friendly font. So what we have found is that what helps dyslexia readers the most are a mixed case caps. So some of the words are, oh my goodness, the first letter of a word is capped. First letter of a sentence, God, really, I should get some coffee from those buff dudes. We found the mixed case really works, as well as single story casing. So the A, if you look at on the screen, it's shaped like how a kid would write an A versus how a Times New Roman A looks. And we found that really helps people who are also learning to write at the same time, which is super, super helpful. And then just another interior page. We're very pleased to say that Pocket Peaches has been doing super well in the school market. It was a 2023 ALA Best Graphic Novel for Children. And again, we're really excited to be working with Dora. She is a debut artist and debut author. And we actually have book 2 coming in fall 2024. So maybe we'll see another lift on the backlist there.
Okay, so my name's Sean Celine. I head up Graphic Universe. This is one of the imprints at Lerner Publishing Group. Lerner Publishing Group has been in business since 1959. We celebrated our 65th year this year, which is kind of exciting. It was originated by Harry Lerner, and now his son Adam runs the company. We have 14 imprints. Graphic Universe specifically is one of them, launched in 2006. I've been here for about a year. Our list is eclectic, diverse, and I'm looking forward to running through a couple of them with you real quick here. So first off is Amazing Inventions. There's a 4-book series, nonfiction, aimed at kids at about a 4th grade reading level, 32 pages. It is very much targeted at the school library market. That is who is at the forefront of, our business. It's how we got started. We do a lot more than that now, as you'll see in coming slides. But that is still very much our core interest. Librarian is always front and center of our minds. And this series is geared toward that. I think that we put a lot of love into these, and I think it shows. There's a lot of effort. We don't cut costs on illustrators. It's very complete, very high interest. And coincidentally, I actually wrote the prototype for this video games, which you see a spread from here 2 years before I started at Lerner. Publishing is a small world after all. But I think you can see by the spread, it's very fun. Captions to contextualize the information that's coming across, and there's dialogue here and there. There's a kind of a very concerted effort to put the kid at the front and center of the experience throughout the reading experience. I'm a big fan of these. And a guy was pleasant enough to tell me that this is one of the ones that are doing the best for us. So that's fun to hear. So this is Lightning Bolt Books, not Graphic Universe, not technically comics, but they're comics adjacent. They're for kids grades 2 to 4. And I'll just skip right to the art here so you can see what we're working with. Basically, it's kind of like a comics adjacent prototypical comic, and that we have photos of Minecraft for this one in particular, which does very well in Comics Plus. And as you can see, there's basically a caption. So it's caption, art. It's like a 1 panel per page comic. That's kind of how they were designed, and I think they work very well for that purpose. Obviously, Minecraft and video games back to back. You're seeing that's clearly something kids are searching for in Comics Plus. So I'm going to keep that in mind going forward. And then next up, we have another Lightning Bolt book series, which is called That's Scary. I love this series because it's at the same age range, high interest, photo captions, same general approach. And you can see this lovely, creepy doll here. This is a really fun book because, or a fun series rather, because it takes like what you might consider to be supernatural things, and it's not throwing a wet blanket on that, but it's also not taking an active stance of support for it. I think that's why kids like it so much, because it's just a fair-handed treatment, like leaving room for them to believe or not believe, and it's very fact-based, so really interesting. I like these a lot. All right, so Graphic Universe does a little bit of everything. We have early reader stuff, we have nonfiction, we have fiction, we have middle grade, we have young adult. I think a lot of people aren't familiar with how well-rounded our imprint is. And this is a good example. This is Night and Dana by Anya Davidson. It's YA, 240 pages. It's a really cool story about this young woman who is fascinated with practical effects, B-movies, alt music, and horror films. And it sounds like a lot, but when you look at the narrative and the way you go through the story, it's effortlessly woven together. This is a really personal experience from Anya. I love what she did with this book. The inciting action, rather, is pictured here in this spread, where she decides to put a fake eye that's been wounded on her friend's face using special effects that she's fond of. And then she pretends to get hit by a car in the school parking lot, and then freaks out the people around, of course, which was the intent, and then tears off the eye to show she's fine. To avoid being expelled, they decide to enroll in curricular activities and prove to the principal that they're invested in their education. And as a result, they get this really cool friendship and explore filmmaking. There's a really strong undercurrent of environmental activism here, and it's tied together with the protagonist's desire to find her voice. Really great YA book. I think anybody that's into nerd culture or feels weird is going to love this book. I know I did. This one's called Notes from a Sickbed. It's another YA graphic novel by Tessa Brunton. It's a wildly imaginative depiction of someone who has chronic fatigue syndrome. Obviously, I think the appeal is pretty evident right there, but when you look at the art, you can see that this is a really sophisticated comics creator who knows how to keep it legible. Like, it's important with school libraries front of mind and everything we do, that everything has a very clear visual comprehension, very easy to read. But you can see by the layout here, I mean, this is some really innovative stuff. I love the way that she used the handmade photo borders that are colored with patterns as the panel borders themselves. I'm a big comics technique nerd, so I think, frankly, any librarian that's looking for a comic book for a comics obsessed reader is going to love this one, because it's got a great story. It's about a very important topic, and there's a lot of interesting comic technical skills on display, I guess you could say. This one's Amazona by Canizales. It's about a 19-year-old indigenous Colombian woman who returns home after losing her child, but she comes with a purpose to capture footage of the illegal mining that displaced her family and forced them to leave. This was nominated for the Sophie Castile Award for Best Translation of Graphic Novels in Languages Around the World. And I think you look at the spread, you get the appeal right away. I mean, there's this wonderful usage of color to convey emotion, especially as contrast against the violence at display here. Obviously, since we have School Library at heart, we keep most of the stuff that might be objectionable off panel and intimated instead of displayed. I think that's more effective anyway. But this is still hard hitting. It still depicts a very harrowing journey, and it's a deeply personal story. I recommend it for anybody that is really into reading about memoir or biography. There's another YA novel called A Game for Swallows, To Die, To Leave, Return. Speaking of Backlist, this is from all the way back in 2012, which feels like another world, but it still holds up. I think fans of Persepolis will love this. It's about a family that is experiencing the divide in Beirut between West and East, Christians and Muslims, and the sniper fire, the shelling outside of their home, but they work extremely hard to create a safe and loving home environment, even when they're hearing bombs explode outside of their windows. It is a really exceptional book. It was so successful that in 2022, we released a revised edition, and it was a ALA Notable Children's Book, Batchelder Award Honor Book, which is for books in translation, and the also a great graphic novel for teens list as well. And you can see the art here. Very cool. I think it looks great in Comics Plus. It was probably my favorite that I read when you gave me that demo. I appreciate that. I think it might have been just because of the high contrast art plays really well with the digital screen. Yeah. And then we have this one, which apparently is doing very well in Comics Plus. And again, it's from 2011. It's Lily Renee, escape artist, from Holocaust survivor to comic pioneer. My favorite thing about this one is a lot to love, obviously. But it's a biography about a comics pioneer written by a comics pioneer, and both of them were women, and both of them were at the forefront of movements, respectively. Trina, for example, was one of the first really prominent women in the underground comics movement, and Lily Renee Wilhelm was a colorist and a penciler at a time in the golden age of comics, at a time when there weren't a lot of women working in that business. So I mean, it's kind of got like a dual kind of appeal there. And it's I like to quote the New York Times Book Review, which is, this is a smart little biography that will appeal to history buffs, comic book fans, and anyone who likes a gutsy pioneering heroine. And I love the art. It's reminds me of old school comics. It's very appealing, very simple. And you can see that there's some comics element in the comic, which I think is kind of a theme for our stuff so far. And then, you know, when you're looking at Backlist, it's fun to look forward to. These are some of the books that are either currently released or about to be released. Just Another Story is an amazing immigration story from Ernesto Saad. He's from El Salvador, and he tells about his cousin and his cousin's mother's journey from El Salvador to the United States. Excuse me. It's harrowing, but it's very carefully told. There's a lot of love in it. And I like his depiction or description of the title of the book. This is the story of Carlos and Elena, the story of thousands, the story of my country. This is just another story. He's really trying to drive home the idea that it's a very common story, despite how upsetting and harrowing the journey was. Excuse me, my gosh. The next one is Hotelator by Josh Hicks. I'm just going to read the tagline for this. It's the galaxy's worst first job. I think teenagers today can really relate to that situation. I'm sure a lot of them are enduring difficult financial situations, as we all know. This one is The Bodyguard Unit. It is about the jujitsu suffragettes of the early 20th century. It's a fascinating story about how Edith Giroud helped train a bunch of women who were fighting for equity and equality to use a restraint-based martial art to fight back against individuals who are trying to keep them silent and down. Great book. Got a star review from Kirkus, I believe. And the last one here is Power Button by Zach Soto. It's upper middle grade. Basically, two teen superheroes by proxy save the world from aliens. It's a lot of fun. The art style is completely unique. I think any kid that likes superhero comics is going to really dig into this series. The new one is coming out the second one is coming out this year as well.
Hello, everybody. Once again, I'm Morgana, Sales and Marketing Coordinator at Yen Press. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Yen, we are a manga publisher. We were founded in 2006. However, we publish more than manga. It is probably what we're best known for. We also publish light novels, middle grade graphic novels, Korean comics, and recently audiobooks. So we've kind of got our hands in everything. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about our most successful books on Comics Plus. And I'm going to start with one you're probably all familiar with, the Berrybrook Middle School series by Svetlana Shmakova. This has been a huge series for us ever since Awkward was published in, I believe, 2015. So talk about Backlist. It's been around for a while, and it is ongoing. These are wonderful, wonderful middle grade books. I love Svet's artwork and how, you know, it's definitely manga inspired. She kind of got her start making English language manga, original English language manga. But she has grown so much as an artist, and she just has these beautiful this beautiful quality to her work, and amazing paneling, and really wonderful sense of preteen and teen emotions. So Awkward, Brave, Crush, they've all been out for a while. I do want to mention Enemies, which came out in 2020, end of 2022, I believe. This is the newest in the Berrybrook Middle School series. These books do not need to be read in order. You don't need to have read Awkward to read Enemies. The characters all go to the same middle school, and a lot of the characters who are the main characters in the later books are in the previous books. In this one, Felicity is the protagonist, and she is part of the other books as well. Enemies is a really great story, one that I personally feel like I can identify with. Felicity, you know, she's like a lot of tweens. She loves taking on new tasks. She loves projects. She loves trying something new. She's an artist. She's interested in a lot of things, but she has trouble with follow through. And this story kind of deals with her coming to terms with that, kind of learning to work through the things that hold her back, and learning how to deal with kind of interpersonal conflict as her project pits her against somebody she used to think of as a very close friend. As you can see, there's a lot of internalized pressure, which again, super relatable. She's putting pressure on herself. She feels pressure from her family, even if her family is not putting the pressure on her. She feels like she needs to live up to certain expectations. And she really just wants to prove that she can do something awesome. And she and her friends get in on this big kind of entrepreneurial project they're doing in school. And they want to start something big. So I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it's a really fun story. Again, I think a lot of preteens are dealing with these kind of, thinking about what the future holds for them. They're trying to find their identity, trying to find the path that they want to take, what they're interested in. And Svet has an incredible talent for understanding the preteen experience, even though she's an adult with children of her own. So they bring me back, these books. They just put me right back in middle school in a good way. Not in a horrible, embarrassing, oh God, I never want to do that again kind of way. And they're just a pleasure to read. In the same vein as the Berrybrook Middle School series, we have these great middle grade graphic novels from debut artist Bon Hyung Jeong. Kyle's Little Sister came out in 2021. This is a story about Grace, who is starting middle school, which is great, except that now she's in school with her older brother, Kyle. And Kyle is perfect. Everybody loves Kyle. And she just knows that because she's not as outgoing, as sporty, as smart as Kyle, he's going to ruin something for her somehow. So this is a really great story about sibling relationship, learning that your sibling probably doesn't have it out for you, even if you feel like they might. It's a really cute story about friendship also, and how kind of, you need to learn how to communicate with your friends in order to avoid misunderstanding and in order to avoid blaming your brother for all your problems. And this past December, Bon followed Kyle's Little Sister up with Amy's Big Brother. Once again, these are both standalones. You don't have to have read Kyle's to read Amy's, but they are set in the same universe. The main character in Amy's Big Brother, Andrew, is a character, he's one of Kyle's friends, actually. And in this, we go back in time a little bit to when he starts middle school, and he is trying to break away from Amy, his little sister. Amy is one of Grace's best friends, because she's annoying, and she's their parents' biological daughter, whereas Andrew is an adopted older brother. So he feels a little bit like maybe they treat her differently because she's a biological child versus an adopted child. So there's that conflict, but he knows going to middle school is going to change everything. He's going to be king of the school. And when he gets there, he meets Hannah, and he falls in love almost instantly, as you can see in this beautiful spread here. I love these 2 pages where he kind of sees her for the first time and is just smitten. And as they get to know each other, they get to like each other a little bit more. Andrew asks Hannah out, and she agrees to date him. And from there, we kind of deal with the conflict of first love. And again, it's about communication, really learning how to communicate your feelings to somebody you are interested in romantically, learning that maybe you need to slow down or try to get on the same page before moving forward with a relationship. So it is definitely great for middle schoolers, but it is also pretty relatable for adults. I think a lot of adults kind of struggle with communication in relationships. And much like Svet's artwork, Bon's artwork is beautiful. She uses beautiful colors, has this wonderful kind of manga-inspired artistic appeal. I love her paneling. I love this, you see Hannah kind of popped out from the page there. Just love it. Beautiful stuff. So definitely, you have readers who like Barry Brook. Bond's books are another great kind of read alike, and one that, from what I can tell, is doing very well in Comics Plus. Changing gears, I do want to talk about a couple manga. First up is Sasaki and Miyano. This is a big one for us. We started publishing Sasaki and Miyano a couple of years ago, and there was an anime adaptation soon after, and so this one totally blew up. This is a really sweet high school romance. It is a boys' love title, which, if you're not unfamiliar, is a story about boys or men who are involved in romantic relationships. So it is a queer comic, LGBTQ comic. This one is completely appropriate for a teenage audience. There's nothing naughty that goes on here, just a straightforward high school romance, wherein Miyano is a young boy who is really interested in reading boys' love manga. He's definitely not gay himself, of course, but he really likes reading them. They just make him feel, they're just so romantic, and he loves them. And he meets an older student, an upperclassman, who is kind of curious about these books he's reading, and he lets Sasaki, his upperclassman, borrow some of his books. And surprisingly, Sasaki really likes them. He was a little surprised at first, but he found that he really liked the story. And so the two kind of start to bond over the books. And of course, eventually, maybe they're kind of interested in each other, and where does it go from there? So again, a really sweet high school romance. We have 9 volumes available right now, and the series is ongoing. Again, totally appropriate for a teen audience, 13 plus. There is an anime adaptation, so I would not be surprised if there's a lot of interest. It is currently streaming, I believe, on Crunchyroll. So if you have boys' love fans, this is definitely one to check out. And finally, So I'm a Spider, So What? This is a manga adaptation of a light novel, which we also publish. We began publishing this in 2017, I believe. There are 12 volumes of the manga available now. This is also a very special case where we actually simultaneously publish individual chapters of the story as they come out, simultaneous with Japan. So those chapters are also available on Comics Plus as they come out. In fact, I believe I'm sending metadata for one later this week, so there will be a new one up soon. So this is a really fun series. It's in the vein of other kind of reincarnation stories where there's some strange accident or something that happens, and this young woman is reincarnated as a spider, a very low-level monster in a kind of an RPG world. And she has to kind of fight her way through these dungeons and try to survive being a very, again, low-level monster. It's a really cute series, again, based off of the light novel series, which we also publish. And it also had an anime adaptation that was very successful a couple years ago, available to stream on Crunchyroll as well. So fun fantasy series, kind of silly. The manga especially is kind of funny. You can see her discovering here that she is a spider, as she just hatched from her egg with tons and tons of other spiders. I apologize for anybody in the audience who is arachnophobic. Luckily, they're pretty cute as spiders go. So yeah, it's a really fun, silly kind of adventure story that does get more serious, and the stakes do get a little higher. But again, this is also great for teens who love fantasies and video games and tabletop RPGs and things like that. So obviously these are all available through Comics Plus, and I recommend checking it out if you're not already part of it. But we are also, our print books are sold and distributed through Hachette Book Group. There's an email address there or phone number if you do not already have an account with Hachette. And you can also purchase us through Ingram, Baker and Taylor, and Bookzine. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, morgana.santilli@yenpress.com. And that's it for me. Guy, back to you.
So thanks all 3 of you for taking us through some of your back and front list in some cases. The couple of things I want to talk about. So let's first talk about backlist in general. The general industry trends, particularly from 2020 forward, when backlist sales seem to really accelerate with the early stages of the pandemic. I've seen numbers anywhere from 65 to 70% of annual sales, in publishing in general, are backlist. And then when you think of libraries as kind of repositories of books in general, backlist is an even bigger deal of what typically is found on library shelves. So a couple of you, so in the Big Nate example, Erin, you mentioned specifically, new Big Nate comes out, old Big Nates start to pop up on the bestseller list. We see that with Big Nate. Anytime a new one comes out, some of the older titles start to rise up, and new Big Nate means in our most popular page, which is the 25 most popular titles for, I think it's a rolling 2 weeks. A week after a new Big Nate comes out, there's 3 or 4 more Big Nates in that top 25. Svetlana isn't as prolific, but when Enemies came out, Awkward kind of almost never leaves our top 25. But anytime it kind of fades out, Enemies came out, Awkward, and interestingly, Crush came back up. Brave is always kind of oddly sat third out of those 3. And then Lerner's an interesting one. The video games, not encyclopedia, but the Amazing Inventions video games. That one was what, for a while, was one of our most popular overall titles. Kind of not out of nowhere, because gaming in general is a really popular category for us. But it was interesting to see that one did really well, but we didn't see a similar uplift for the others in that series because the thematic connection isn't quite the same. So talk a little bit about where you might have examples of where backlist, beyond a Big Nate, beyond a Svetlana, where you see backlist not necessarily just driving readership of the related title, but where do you see that impacting readalikes? Both of you mentioned readalikes as examples for some of your titles as well. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so what we've noticed is, as we kind of mentioned, front list helps backlist, backlist helps front list, but it's also, and I'm sure everybody's going to nod when I say this word, a lot of our biggest challenges when we publish books is something called discoverability. So it used to be that we would walk into a bookstore and you would see what the booksellers have put on display. And it still is like that in many of the amazing indies and some of the larger retail stores. But a lot of people go shopping online. And that is also still totally valid. Trust me, my boyfriend is always mad about the boxes at the door for me. So discoverability is something we're always looking into and kind of trying to find out how we can access, because when you're buying books now, there's less of a my grandchild loves video games, what should I get for them? And more searching on Google, book for child who loves video game. And so what you're trying to do is, I guess, get the reader likes to find out, okay, you read this book, you should read this book, which also really helps. What we also really enjoy doing in this sense is kind of pairing authors and pairing books together. So we might have a book that did really, really well in backlist and have a debut book coming out, and we'll see if that backlist author wants to blurb the new author. Maybe the new author wants to blurb the other author's upcoming book, to kind of foster, as I said, more reading, more literacy, more people in the comics community. Books aren't competing with each other. They're competing with everything else that everybody's doing. We're all working together. I'm so happy whenever I hear, again, listening to both Sean and Morgana, I was like, oh, I love all the books you're talking about. Like, I could totally nerd out and geek about all of these things. But I mean, even 3 of us can work together to kind of find ways to partner and see how our backlists and our front lists can help each other. Ultimately, discoverability is just such a big thing, and that is what we're really looking at, and helping to, as we mentioned, mine the backlist to help the front list and vice versa.
Cool. So Sean, let's talk a little bit about Lerner, because you guys are unique in some aspects where you prioritize school libraries first, and then consumer sales are kind of a secondary market for you. And I always use you guys as an example of K-12 specific focused publishers who have done a particularly interesting job of aging up. Like I don't want to make comparisons. You have a very strong line of YA titles that maybe stands out from some of your other direct competitors. Talk a little bit about what possibly drove that and where, if any, backlist information kind of drives front list decisions at that age level.
Well, yeah, it's a great observation. I mean, you're completely right. Like we have Carol Rhoda and Carol Rhoda Lab. We have Zest. We have 21st Century Books, Darby Creek. A lot of things that people wouldn't expect from a school library publisher to branch out to. We've had success. I think a lot of it is because it's a family-owned company. A lot of it is because we are in Minnesota. We have strong Minnesota roots. So people who are here, I mean, like all my colleagues have been here for, I just talked to a woman who is going to walk into my office right now that's been here for 40 plus years. I mean, I think when you have that kind of commitment from your employees, the idea of growing and branching out and trying new things kind of becomes more of an adventure than a challenge. That's definitely been my observation so far. In terms of backlist, we're spending so much time trying to figure out why people buy what they buy. I just talked to a colleague, John Fishman, who works for the Lerner Publishing School Library imprint. He and his colleague, Amber Ross, both just talked to a bunch of librarians, and we learned a lot. Like, for example, a little bit less interest in curriculum-based content and far more in just anything that's high interest that kids will want to read of their own volition. And so that is kind of informing some of our lists in terms of like how I might be looking at things. Apparently Versus books are doing very well. So I had a series I want to do about animal comics that was more of an institutional school library focused series. And I'm thinking like maybe it's like capybara versus honey badger now. I don't know. Like, you know, I mean, it's you have to stay open to these new channels, these new possibilities. You know, I think in that sense, backlist is like, well, we look at what's worked well and we try to draw conclusions from that and going forward. But I think everybody here can agree that there's just as much intuition to this as there is analytical data that we're basing our decisions on.
And Morgana, so one thing I'm curious about with Yen, of all of your manga that I would have expected to kind of be at the tops of our list, I wasn't expecting those two in particular. And, you know, the stereotype for mangas, it's shonen and everything else. And you guys have got, you know, beyond the two series you talked about, you've got a number of, you know, what wouldn't be considered shonen series that do really well. Talk a little bit about, as a manga publisher, finding, you know, how does backlist information at all drive the non-shonen acquisitions you guys make, and what seems to do well for you in other markets?
So we're in a very unique position as a manga publisher that whenever there's an anime adaptation, our backlist does great. So there's a recent anime adaptation of Delicious in Dungeon, which we also have available on Comics Plus. We started publishing this series in 2017, and it always did decently for us in terms of sales, and it is exceeding what it had been doing previously. So we have a very nice and easy kind of built in, and not that it's always easy, but when there are those anime adaptations, it really does help the backlist. In terms of like how we choose to publish what we publish, there's definitely a lot of, you know, seeing what we published in the past and what works for sure. With something like Sasaki and Miyano, in manga in general, we've noticed the trend that boys love, or BL manga, it's always done pretty well in the North American market and has just been increasing and increasing. And so we are one of a handful of manga publishers in North America, and I've noticed all of us increasing our boys love titles. So it's just a category that's doing really well right now. I think with more readers interested in same-sex romances, with more conversations about sexual identity and gender identity, because we're also publishing a lot more manga that is queer but is not about romantic relationships. So stuff about identity. We have this great one, I think, also on Comics Plus called "I Want to Be a Wall," which is about a woman who is asexual who gets married to a gay man, and they kind of, you know, they're kind of getting married for show, and it's them navigating their marriage. And showing how marriage can be something different than just romantic. So we have more things like that, and I'm seeing more like that coming from other manga publishers as well. So it's kind of, you know, seeing what has worked and kind of also testing the waters and seeing what, you know, what readers are looking for. And what does well for us in libraries is not necessarily what does well for us, you know, in the consumer market. It was really interesting to me to hear that So I'm a Spider, So What's doing so well. It does fine for us. It does great, on the sales side, but it's a little bit older. So I don't, it doesn't have a current anime adaptation. The anime is a few years old, so it's it's not the newest hottest thing. So that was really interesting. It's a fun series, and I'm really glad that people are reading it. So yeah, it's I don't know, I think we're all guessing. We're all hoping and praying.
Well, I forget who specifically made a comment about discovery, but I think that's one of the magic aspects of having a platform where you can, libraries are great for this, where if you've got a breadth of content that you can kind of explore, the chances that you're going to find something, allegedly off the radar are a lot higher than if you're relying on a bookstore that is primarily curating front list and focused on the big names. Your ability to discover things, particularly if you're not into shonen, most physical comic stores, not counting Barnes and Noble, which is amazing for manga, most physical comic stores, if they carry manga at all, are going to have shonen. Most libraries prioritize those key shonen titles because in some cases there are dozens and dozens of volumes and the demand for them is high, but it minimizes the ability for libraries to engage readers who are not interested in shonen. So Sean and Morgana, you both made references that I want to touch on specifically for this audience. So obviously, America 2024 book bans, challenges, the focus and targets of these challenges, there's a certain consistency to them. So, Sean, first, as a school library specific publisher, what have the past couple of years been like navigating that reality, and how, if at all, do they affect kind of the decisions around either what you do or don't publish, or how you market what you do publish?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer because it's one of those things where it's constantly on our minds. We also try not to pay too much attention to it in terms of what we're doing with our lists. We have a very informed approach to what we're doing with our books. As far as I know, we haven't veered away from anything we have been doing, and we've definitely veered toward things that I would consider to be hot political points, intentionally, because this is a company that cares about kids, cares about reading, cares about librarians. And I suppose that's the big thing, is we're always trying to consider, okay, what is the school librarian's experience in dealing with these things and navigating that environment? And what can we do to put books in their hands that are going to, one, minimize some of those challenges, but two, giving them opportunities to talk about those issues in ways that aren't as readily identifiable as the law, for example, that was briefly in place in Texas, with the potential need for us to target our own books with problematic material. It's a nightmare. I don't know how you elegantly navigate all of this, except to just hope that you keep doing the same thing the right way and growing and trying to bring access to the books that might be challenged. It's tough. It's really tough.
Morgana and Aaron, do either of you have any particular, as primarily consumer first focused publishers, do either of you have insight or advice to librarians who are trying to understand how to identify potentially, in quotes, problematic material?
So I'll say from our perspective, we have not changed the kind of content we publish based on that. We absolutely 110% have books that have explicit sexual material. I would not say it's fully pornographic, but definitely stuff not for children. We have age ratings on all of our books. Teens, 13 plus, all ages tends to be more of our middle grade and younger. We have 16 plus, older teen, so those might be a little bit steamier, but they're not full on, sexy books. And we absolutely have 18 plus mature books. Those are not appropriate for younger readers. So pay attention to that is my piece of advice for when it comes to manga. I would say most manga publishers are very careful about that because we've had issues in the past. There's definitely titles of ours that I know are not doing, are not being offered in libraries. Even some of the ones that are in Sasaki and Miyano is probably not offered. And unfortunately that has nothing to do with the content so much as the bias. It's totally appropriate for teens. I've read it. It's a great series. But because it has gay characters in it, you know, that's gonna be an issue for some districts. And I have a lot of sympathy for the librarians and teachers and everyone who has to kind of navigate those. I had was at Comics Pro last week conference, and I had a retailer say, "Oh, did you know this book is it's kind of for older kids, isn't it? Or like older readers." I had a parent complain, and I was looking at the book. I'm like, "Oh, well, this is an older teen book. That's why, like, it is spicy. You got to look at the back." You know, to me, like, I would have been like, "It's not that bad. It's fine." So yeah, definitely pay attention to the age ratings on manga. We try to be careful about that. As much as you can, and this is the advice I give comics retailers as well, kind of, this is very difficult, I know, but try to get some familiarity with the content, with the books themselves. I think that, you know, there are so many districts that are going to have different, I don't know, different bogeymen, I guess is the you know, word. And again, we try to be pretty clear about what our books are about, but that does not always help. So I have a lot of sympathy, and email me. You can ask me questions. I will do my best to help. That's all I can say. But yeah, those ratings are there, and we hope they help.
Erin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love what you said, especially about emailing, especially about like kind of trying to familiarize yourself with the content as much as possible. Because if somebody asks me what's appropriate, it's going to be different from possibly what everybody else in the room thinks is appropriate, depending on the exact kid or the reader. Because again, just because it's appropriate for one 12-year-old doesn't mean another 12-year-old won't be totally terrified by the content or very freaked out. What we have been doing is, in general, we kind of compile themes for a book anyway that we include on our sales copy. So we include themes like, this book is about cute bunnies. And now we've also been including some content that people might be looking for, either to specifically highlight or unfortunately not be able to put in their classrooms. So we have been flagging that not just as like a flag, like, oh, here's queer content. It's more just like, just in the same way that there is pin collecting in this book, there are also queer characters, as there should be. But this is definitely something that's top of mind. And it's honestly something that, like, you know, every time I mention this, I do get teary-eyed, so I apologize if that's going to happen. But I actually grew up in South Florida. Yep, it's already happening. I grew up in South Florida, and I was in a very queer accepting community. My high school was really very diverse. A lot of great things. Honestly, I didn't really feel much of a difference between Florida or when I moved to Boston for college. Felt very similar. And now one of my friends teaches at the high school that I went to. And I asked her, can I send you a box of books? And she said, I really wish I could say yes, but I have to screen absolutely everything that I read, and I can't accept your books. So that is something that I know that everybody is working with right now. Like Morgana said, like, thank you, because we know that this isn't anybody's choice on your end. But it's something that we're certainly aware of, and we certainly want to make sure that we aren't stifling any voices. We want to make sure that we're promoting them as much as possible in the avenues that we can, and hope that people are reading diverse voices, even if they can't find them in their classrooms.
Awesome. Yeah, we're very much aware of what's happening in Florida. We've got some challenges there. So one last comment before we wrap up. I think it was Erin who first said it specifically, the reluctant readers versus readers who haven't found. I don't think this is how you framed it, but basically there are no reluctant readers. There are readers who haven't found the books that work for them. I personally despise the term reluctant readers and hate when it gets used, but I get that it's a term. So talk a little bit about, and we'll go in reverse since Erin ended. We'll go Morgana, Sean, Erin. Talk a little bit about your take on comics for readers, full stop, period.
Comics are great for everyone. Well, like Sean was saying, you know, he said that he wasn't a big reader as a kid and that comics changed that. So I really think that there's a lot to be said for visual literacy. I do think that we learn to read, and having those context clues, having that kind of movement helps kind of parts of our brain, connect with the narrative. So when we're talking about very young readers reading comics, I do think there's a lot of benefit there for actually learning how to read. But also, I mean, reading should be enjoyable. There's definitely reading that should be, reading for the sake of knowledge and information and bettering yourself. But I also think that reading begets reading. So you read those comic books, you'll read more comic books, maybe you'll read novels, maybe you'll read other things. And, again, at Yen, we're in a very privileged position that we publish the comic books, and we also publish a lot of novels, which usually are tied into a lot of those comic books. So we have something, for that reader who says, I loved this manga, where do I go next? Like, well, do you want to try something, this story that you love, but like with words only? Although there are illustrations as well. But yeah, I think reading begets reading, and anything that gets books in kids' hands, I guess we all work in publishing here. We feel very strongly about books, and I hate to think of reading as being an odious chore for anyone. So I really think even if the only thing that comics are doing is making reading enjoyable, I think that's worthwhile. So
Cool. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I think Morgana just said something really interesting. I think visual comprehension is great for people who may not be interested in tackling novels or fiction right out of the gates, because it does allow for that contextual clue of the visual set against the text. I mean, I think enough things can't be said of a positive nature about visual literacy, visual comprehension. And I think if comics are like the gateway towards other kinds of reading, I think that's a wonderful thing, and we should embrace it. That's kind of how I got my career started too. When I was at Stone Edge Books, we were doing high-low, so high interest, low reading level books, comic books aimed at boys, because at the time, way back when, I'm aging myself here, but that was the primary concern of librarians, is how do we get these boys who don't want to read to read? And I think what you said about reluctant readers not really being a thing, I mean, they are a thing, but I think it should be phrased differently. It's not that they're reluctant readers, it's that we just haven't gotten the right book in their hands. And I think for a lot of kids, comics kind of serve that purpose, at least an entryway. Every time somebody asks me for books, obviously I'm recommending books that I've worked on in the past, because I'm not completely free of bias. But for example, every time I've recommended Raina Telgemeier to parents, the kids who don't want to read, they immediately start reading, and they're obsessive about it, and they became avid readers. Like, it's literally almost a 100% success rate. So there are definitely comics that I think prove that idea that reluctant readers are a thing. Is more like, you just got to give them something that they're interested in and get them started in a path that makes sense to them, reach them on their terms.
Cool. All right. Erin?
Yeah, just tagging in there. The term that I like to use, and I don't really know if this is kind of an industry term, it's just the term that I've been using, so Andrews McMeel has adopted it, is distracted reader. And we're saying distracted reader just because it's not the reluctance, as we've all kind of echoed. It's the fact that they are doing so many other things in their day. Their phone's distracting, their computers are distracting, family is distracting as it should be, friends are distracting as they should be. And I should also say this, I play video games, I watch TV, I do sports, I walk the dog, I hopefully have enough time for my family. So I certainly am not saying that in any way are books even more important than anything else somebody is doing, but they are just as important. And literacy, whether it's visual or text, is just as important as well. So I think what we need to understand also as an industry, and also kind of just as people who make great content, is what are they reading and why are they reading it? So kind of like I said earlier, Pokemon cards aren't just rip open the packs, find out if you got Charizard. They're also, you're reading it to see what the attacks are for Charizard. You're kind of putting that together. You see the red and you know it's going to be a fire Pokemon. You see the blue, you know it's going to be a blue Pokemon. And on TikTok, something that I actually would say is pretty good about TikTok is they're really employing a lot of captions on a lot of videos. If you watch TikTok, which is really great for people who are hard of hearing or otherwise can't really access that, especially for neurodivergent watchers. So they are reading captions as well. they're reading a lot of different things, whether it's street signs, it's, something else. And I think one of the challenges, and in a way, one of the exciting challenges that we have, is reaching those people. So, okay, you like Pokemon cards. Do you like this? Okay, you like this on TikTok. Do you like this? And that's not me saying because something's on TikTok, it's going to sell, by the way. That's not it at all. I'm saying that as somebody who has spent hours on TikTok a day. So definitely, it's all kind of just advancing.
Awesome. I mean, basically read-alikes for everything, not just other books. So thanks again, Aaron, Sean, Morgana, Andrews McMeel, Graphic Universe / Lerner, and Yen Press. Thank you guys, your bosses, for being partners with Comics Plus. If you'd like to learn more about Comics Plus, comicsplusapp.com. And stay tuned. We'll be actually back next month with another webinar where we're going to talk about a lot of the questions we hear about comics and manga in libraries, how to use them, why to use them, how to talk to people who say you shouldn't use them. We're going to cover everything there. So join us for that next month. We'll get some information about that. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, and we will see you soon. Read all the comics forever.